Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of my ride recreation series. For today's episode, we are going to switch things up a little bit. We are going to finally be leaving the United States, heading over to Europe, and looking at Helix in Liseberg in Gothenburg, Sweden. If you're unfamiliar with Helix, it is a Mack LSM launch coaster. There aren't a ton of these out there, but I guess you could compare it to Blue Fire Mega Coaster, or maybe Manta or Copperhead Strike, that kind of thing. Technically also Slinky Dog Dash, although that one is a bit different in its layout. This one is definitely more of an intense extreme coaster. Lots of inversions, lots of swoopy dives. It's a very cool looking coaster. Now, I've never been to Liseberg, never been to Sweden, so I have not personally experienced this one. I did watch a POV, of course, a couple times in preparation for this, and it looks like a really awesome coaster. So if you ever get the opportunity, check this one out. So let's take a look at it here on Google Maps, see if we can get a good idea of what we're going to be building here. Here we have Liseberg. It's a nice looking little park. Again, like I say, I've never been here, but having looked at the photos of it for a little bit here in the POV, looks like it would be a great little park to visit. A good chunk of it is built on this hill here, this big green space. It's a pretty steep hill. It doesn't look too much like it on Google Maps, but pretty steep. And Helix is this twisty green structure here. A little bit hard to see, I guess, with all the trees. Took me a minute to figure out how this layout even works. The station is actually up here in this building here with the brown roof, and it pops out this little hole in the wall there. Comes through a corkscrew, does a launch down this straightaway into the rest of the layout. All over this hill, there's another launch over here on the other side into this top hat here before it does some more layout and then finishes back up here by the white half of the building here where this drop tower is. All the meanwhile is going up and down this big steep cliff side and interacting with this white coaster, completely different coaster, but very tightly integrated in the landscape here. There's a swing right here we're going around to. So lots going on in here. Going to be a pretty tight fit, I think, but it's going to be a very interesting challenge, I think, to do this in RCT. Get it all laid out correctly, get it integrating with the hill, getting the elevation and stuff to work out in our favor, and interacting with the pathing and the other coaster here as well. So a little bit of a challenge, but I think it should be pretty fun, and I think it should work well in RCT, especially with the new track pieces that we have for the LSM launch coaster. Hopefully going to make it a little bit easier to put all this stuff together. So let's open up a game and get started. All right, here is the first draft of our layout. As always, this is going to change a lot as we continue the build, get the terrain work in here, get the other coasters and the other attractions going. This is a good start though. It obviously looks a bit weird. Everything's very high off the ground because, as I said earlier, this is on a big hill. We're gonna have to do a lot of work pulling up the terrain underneath the station over here. But as far as the height difference goes, this is pretty good for the lowest part of the ride is the pretzel knot kind of thing over here. I think this is all going to work out okay. Not too big either. I was a little bit concerned that the footprint was going to be a bit too large. I am doing this build for a contest park, and we do have some size restrictions, kind of like we did with Good Gravy. Fortunately, this footprint is going to be a lot more manageable. We're going to have plenty of room. So yeah, pretty cool layout here. As you can see, we're making some good use of the new pieces. As I mentioned earlier, we got some large corkscrews going on here for the first couple corks at the beginning. This pretzel knot here is partially made up of the new dive loop piece that goes diagonally as it exits the pretzel knot, whatever you want to call it. So the track can fit in with itself a little bit better. 0G roll over here before that second launch. Cool stuff. So really excited to have these new pieces to build coasters like this. It went pretty smoothly, didn't have any major issues. We'll see how that goes as we build the other coasters and everything in here. So without further ado, let's get some terrain work going on in here. Alrighty, so yeah, there was a lot going on during that build session, but just to recap, obviously you can see we got our hill in here, so it looks a little bit more normal for the coaster now that we've got some terrain to keep the supports a bit more reasonable height. We have the other coaster in here, Liseberg, a Schwarzkopf Zero family coaster. It was built back in 1987, so much earlier than Helix, which was 2014. But as you can see, there's lots of weird interaction going on, you know, like we saw on Google Maps, especially with this area right here. We've got these two giant helixes that the coaster is doing around what is going to be a swing ride here in the middle. Real heck of a time trying to get all the coaster to fit in here. I am trying to build with clearance checks on correctly for my coaster tracks. You know, you get proper clearance and it doesn't look like the trains are going to be hitting everything. So I did manage to fit everything in here. It still looks kind of strange in places, so I'm definitely going to be tweaking this a bit more later. Maybe smooth out some of the track profiling in here, make it look a little bit more reasonable. Same thing over here at the end of Liseberg. It has a very long brake run that goes out through this Helix on Helix. This version looks a little bit janky, definitely going to want to clean that up later, get that looking a little bit nicer. Also starting to work on some of the path. There's 3 levels of path going through in a kind of a horizontal way. So you have this middle one here. There's one down here on ground level by the Liseberg station, and also one up here around back behind the Helix station that is going to also go down the hill in both directions. So lots of path going on here, and they're connected by this big escalator that goes up here underneath Helix. So hopefully there's enough room to fit all that in here. So everything's going to be a pretty tight fit. So I think we'll be able to sculpt the terrain in such a way that we can get everything squeezed in here just right. But before I work on that, as you can see, I started a little bit of work on the station for Helix as well. It has kind of a weird look to it, kind of a modernist feel to it. I don't really know. I don't know much about architecture styles, look at some pictures. It's kind of weird looking, not the kind of thing that you can easily replicate in RCT. And the station for atmosphere, the drop tower, is perfectly circular. So again, that's not going to be something we're going to be able to do very easily. So right now it's kind of got that kind of octagonal shape. That's kind of the best you can do right now. I think it's going to look a little bit better if instead of trying to make it look circular, I just gave it a different interesting geometric shape. It's not going to be totally accurate, of course, but it's going to play better to RCT's scenery strengths and maybe look a little bit more interesting than just a big circle. Let's keep working on this station and see if we can make something look halfway reasonable. All right, some nice progress being done in that build session. Had a little issue with the replay. As you can see, I'm doing something a little bit different for the record this time, using OpenRCT2's built-in replay system to play back the build. Still some issues with that. If you use certain cheats, it doesn't play nicely. So you didn't see any peeps coming in the replay, but they are here and they are getting lost, as to be expected. It's a lot of paths that go nowhere. But they're also on the rides, riding both coasters, having a great time, very exciting. As you can see, done a lot of work with terrain, getting some ideas for how we can do some of the rocky terrain that we see on the side of the hill. Started work on the station for Liseberg. It has a very cool kind of like train station look to it. It's a very nice looking building, so trying to kind of get that feel with it over here. Obviously a long ways to go yet, not done, but getting some ideas for what I want the textures for it to look like, that kind of thing. And over here on the other end, we've got our escalator. Played around with a couple different ideas for how we want the roof for it to look. It's kind of a weird shape, especially for RCT. Looks a bit strange from Google Maps anyway. Wound up using some different track layering with some raft pieces, wooden coaster, and car ride to get this roof with this weird curvy shape. I think it looks okay. Obviously it's a bit funky because that's what you get in RCT, but it's distinctive and I don't know, I kind of like it. So that big staircase will take you up into the atmosphere station and up here to the top of the map. So still some work on connecting the paths to do. And once we get that figured out, hopefully we'll get fewer people getting lost and all that stuff. But so far things are shaping up pretty nicely. So I think we're just going to continue working over here on the Liseberg station, get this area a bit more fleshed out over here, maybe start working on some more of the detailing for this coaster as well. Obviously we're not done with Helix yet either. There's still a lot of work I want to do on that, like custom supports, for example. I'm going to save those until the very last minute because the terrain work is going to affect how those look. So I want to make sure that all the terrain work is done before I do any custom supports. And of course, with enough foliage in the way, you can avoid doing some of that detailing because you just wouldn't see it anyway. And I'll probably wind up tweaking some more of the layout here as we go regardless. All right, so somehow we managed to cram in the Scream and Swing over here. It is absolutely wild to me that they chose to put it here on this cliff over top of this existing coaster when they built it. But they did, and there's barely enough room for it here in my build. I did have to tweak the Helix of Liseberg a little bit to get it to fit in. So I was able to smooth it out a little bit. It still looks a bit silly. It still looks a little bit square, but I feel like there's not a whole lot you can do about it to get it to fit in with, you know, the restrictions that RCT gives us. That's all right. I'm pretty happy with the way the Scream and Swing turned out anyway. It's a pretty standard build, the kind of thing that I've built before. So nothing too crazy going on there. Pretty much wrapped up the station as well. This building here, I think it looks pretty nice. Still probably a little bit more detailing to do here and there, but I'm ready to move on and work on something a little bit different for now. This area is starting to shape up quite nicely though. So I think next thing we'll do, I think I want to pivot a little bit, go back to the Helix and Atmosphere stations, see if we can make these look a little bit nicer, do a little bit more detailing with some of the pathing, some of the terrain work over here, maybe make the station building look a little bit more interesting, that kind of thing. So yeah, back to work. All right, another building session out of the way. Some more wonky stuff going on the replay there. Hopefully you got the gist of it. Mostly more landscaping, I guess. Working on the path back here behind the coasters that connects over here to where the swing is. This section of the park, this section of Liseberg is really wonky. Definitely doesn't work very well in RCT. There's a lot of different elevations going on that are just not gonna cut it for putting things together the right way. You might have noticed earlier in the replay, I briefly experimented with putting the log flume in. There is a log flume that cuts through this area. It kind of goes like under the path here and under the Helix launch, something like that. But definitely not enough room for everything to go in where it's supposed to go, especially because this launch here on Helix is a little bit of an incline in real life. So there's more room to put things where you need them to go. Doesn't work here for me, so I'm just gonna omit it completely. We're not doing an entire recreation of Liseberg, just this section of it, which admittedly is a pretty big section of the park, but I'm not gonna sweat the details about getting in every ride over here. I'm already doing more than enough with the other coaster, the swing. There's a bunch of weird stuff over here that we haven't even looked at yet, like this merry-go-round and the details around there. Still lots of work to do to get this part of the park put together. But overall, if you zoom out a bit here, making good progress. I'm liking the way things are shaping up, especially once we start plopping down trees. Like I always say, things look a lot better once you start surrounding them with trees. I'm just gonna keep continuing to work over here. There is another ride over here called Aerospin. It's a big swing ride. We're gonna do some shoestringing to get that put together. And that's gonna take up the space over here. Maybe clean up this merry-go-round a little bit. There are, I think, like a couple play areas back here as well. I don't think there's gonna be room for them, especially with the way the turnaround for Liseberg Banan is. Just gonna kind of wing it and see what there's room for, what we can do. Just gonna get this area tidied up. I've also got over here in the corner my track architecture collection. This whole section of the park, I'm not going to build. There's a station for the log flume, I think. Is it a log flume or is it a river rapids? I don't remember. It's one of those things. Not going to build that. I want this holding area for right now for all my track architecture, and then we'll delete this later. Definitely have enough on my plate right now with getting just this little corner filled out. Anyway, making good progress, but more work to do, so let's get back to it. All right, I think that about wraps up, for the most part, this corner of the map here. I got arrow spin over here looking pretty nice. And merry-go-round, I didn't do a ton of detailing on the merry-go-round. The real-life one is a bit more fancy than this, but I didn't want to get too in the weeds with detailing, especially because we're a bit strapped for room over here. And we also have an entranceway at the edge over here. We're going to build another tunnel here. The real-life path over here has got some more covering, kind of like the escalator. Looks a little bit different than the escalator covering does, so I'll get to that later. Still a bit more foliage and terraining over here to do as well, but we're almost done with this corner, so I'm pretty happy with things so far. We're getting kind of close to the end here already, actually. A bit more to do on this side of the park. Obviously, some terrain and trees need to go over here. And then after that, I think we'll be about ready to start working on custom supports for Helix. So that's pretty exciting. Looking forward to that. I'm not actually looking forward to it. I hate doing custom supports, but they make your coasters look good, so you got to do it. Anyway, let's wrap up some work on the Helix station over here. I do want to get this corner over here cleaned up a little bit so we can prep for finishing up this map. Alrighty, that is going to do it for the time lapse, and that is going to do it for this build. You just watched me do a bunch of awful custom supports. I mean, I complain about them, but like I said, they do really make your coaster look good. Work like this with a bunch of diagonal track, mainly copying and pasting every piece one by one to make these like weird lattice structures for this top hat. A lot of work. It's pretty tedious, but I do think it really looks nice when all is said and done. It supports like these poles here for the 0G roll and for the pretzel knot over here. It does help draw the eye towards these elements, gives them a bit more attention, which I think helps. I think it helps the layout look pretty nice overall. Yeah, that's gonna about do it for the build, like I said. So let's give a quick tour here through the park, starting up here with the station for Helix. I did build a Ferris wheel next to it in real life. There is a pretty large Ferris wheel in this area. I didn't want to try to cram a gigantic Ferris wheel right here on the edge of the park. I felt like it would distract a little bit too much from the station, so I decided to just go for a vanilla one. And I think it works out pretty nicely. Helps give, you know, the peeps something extra to do over here. So next to the station for Helix, we also have Atmosphere, the roto drop, and behind it, the brake run for Helix, I think turned out pretty nice. I spent way too much time looking at the details for the brake run. I don't know, for some reason I just find it fascinating to look at these kinds of infrastructure for roller coasters, the way that they're set up and the way that they're integrated into their buildings and their environments. I think always looks pretty neat, and it's fun to try to replicate that stuff here in RCT. But coming out of the station, we've got our drop into our corkscrew. Taking it a little bit slow, but that's fine. It'll always make it through. There's peeps on it. They'll help weigh the tray down. Gotta launch into another corkscrew and then into the main part of our layout here. Up and over the escalator tunnel here, which I think turned out pretty nicely. Into that pretzel knot, over our airtime hill, through our 0G roll. There's a little helix around Liseberg Banan, and up into the mid-course and the second launch into the top hat. And then we just have some twists and turns around. That was a nice interaction there with those two trains. Did not plan that, but that's cool. Around the back up the hill and into one final little barrel roll here before we hit the brakes. Like I said earlier, it's a really cool layout. Watch the POV. It looks like a ton of fun. I would love to ride this coaster someday. Sweden is very far away though, so hopefully that'll happen one day. You never know. Yeah, like I said, we have our escalator here that goes down the hill. Put in some little river raft stairs here to try to emulate the textures you get there. It's always a nice little detail. Over here on the other side, we have Liseberg Banan, this little family coaster. It is a pretty large scale for a family coaster. It also looks like it would be pretty fun to ride. Going around the Scream and Swing here, interacting a lot with Helix. And over in the back here, we have our merry-go-round and our swing ride. Forget exactly what the model of this is. It's something kind of rare that I have not been on myself, so the name eludes me. And we have a path going here back around behind the park here to connect back up to the station. Did spend a little bit of time off camera finishing up some details here. Added some stairs to this back path here just to see what it would look like. Try to make things look a little bit tidier back there. Didn't wind up doing it with the rest of the pathing because it was a lot of work and I didn't feel like it would really fit in over here as well. Also, these stairs are kind of hard to do on very hilly terrain because these mini golf pieces can poke out of the terrain and it looks a little bit silly. So over here I have them covered up with trees, but not always going to be possible in the rest of the park. Anyway, that's going to do it for the build here. Definitely could spend more time tidying things up, adding more details, tweaking some things. There's still some stuff about this build I don't entirely like. But there has to be a point where you say, I'm done working on it and ready to move on to the next thing. So still pretty happy with the layout. Helix specifically, I think turned out really nicely. Liseberg Banan probably could spend some more tweaking, especially this back half here. The profiling can be a little bit silly, especially around this Helix and these couple of hills near the end, but that's not the focus of the park. Helix is supposed to be the focus of the park, so I'm pretty happy with that. So that'll satisfy me. Yeah, that's going to do it for this video. If you want to download this park yourself, there should be a link in the description if you want to check it out. And since, as I mentioned, I did this park for a ride creation contest at DKMP, I'll have a link in the description to the results video for that so you can see how my park did compared to all the other ride recreations. But I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.